You are going to be asking a lot of Oklahoma Republicans who have supported Senator Lankford in the past, strongly supported in some cases, to switch their allegiance and vote for you. Why are you the better choice here?
The main reason is my record. If you look at our records, and not just me, but compare it to the incumbent, compare it to anybody else in this race, you'll see that I've actually done what I said I was going to do. It's very easy for candidates to be what I call campaign conservatives. This is Oklahoma. They all campaign this certain way. They all say that they're pro-Second Amendment, they're pro-life, they're for limited spending. You know, they all make these claims, but then whenever they get elected, they get swamped by the pressure, they cave in, and they don't necessarily vote that way. If you look at my voting record, you'll see that I'm ranked 100% conservative because I have consistently voted for those conservative measures. I've consistently not just voted for them, I've actually advanced them. I've passed pro-life legislation. I've passed legislation to not just protect our Second Amendment rights, but to expand those rights here in Oklahoma. I passed constitutional carry. So I haven't just been on the sidelines. I haven't just been having the eloquent speeches during the campaigns. I've actually been fighting for the people, and I feel like, especially in this political environment, that's what people want. They want a proven fighter that's going to stand up and do what they said they were going to do.
I mean, Lankford, though, I've looked at his voting record. No, it's not 100% voting against, say, President Biden, but on the whole, he has a very conservative voting record. Where specifically has he fallen short, in your opinion?
In various times, he has been more conservative, less conservative. His measures have waned over the years at different times.
With what?
And, well, if you look at spending, he has voted for the spending. He has voted for debt increases. He has voted to increase those. So that isn't necessarily a fiscal conservative, what a fiscal conservative would do. So that is one of the main things. And as I've been talking to people across the state, especially younger people, they're extremely concerned about the national debt crisis because we can't just keep spending ourselves into oblivion. It's immoral to be putting these younger generations on the hook for this. Right now, to the tune of $80,000 per taxpayer that they're now going to have to owe because of this out-of-control spending in D.C. If you look at it, I have voted against Republican-led spending measures here at the state level. I voted against Republican-led tax increases. So I've actually been fighting for the people. So there are those differences that people will need to investigate and see, but I am the proven conservative fighter in this race.
Does this have anything to do with the senator's vote to certify electoral votes? January 6th.
That is one of the areas that he and I disagree, because he had originally said he was going to vote against certification. Then he came back later and he said that he was going to vote to certify the election. Whether or not you believe there was fraud, which I do believe that there was fraud in the election.
Do you think Trump won the election?
I do believe that President Trump won the election. But even outside of that, if you look at the constitutional parameters, the Constitution says that the electors in the states are chosen by the method set by the legislatures in the states. If you look at several states throughout the process last year, it was judges that changed it, and they said, well, we're going to allow votes to be counted 3 days after the election, even though that's not the law that the legislature passed. There were executives, governors that changed it. So even if you just look at those measures, constitutional measures, they didn't follow the constitutional process, so that election should not have been certified in that manner.
And I understand that argument very well, and I don't want to get into a huge debate about the election here, because I think that there's been no credible evidence as put forth about fraud in the election. Do you think that technically Donald Trump got more votes than President Biden?
Yes, I do believe that President Trump got more votes than President Biden.
All right. Senator Lankford, and I'm bringing his name up a bunch because you're the guy challenging him. He's very buttoned up. He's a bit dry. And I think he's very concerned about, the decorum of the position. I don't know if I get the same sense with you, not that you're not buttoned up or anything, but you definitely have had a history of not caring about ruffling feathers. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I understand that elections in many ways are a popularity contest in that you have to get the most votes, but I'm not up there to be popular. I'm up there to defend the Constitution, to fight for the people's rights. And if somebody else gets offended by that, that is on them. They can only take offense. I'm not giving offense by standing up for the rights of the people. So that's on them if they get their feathers ruffled because of that.
Of course, and I'll just bring this up. A lot of your Republican colleagues there at the state capitol, they were not happy when you made what many have called, and I think it's probably accurate, a misogynistic comment about Vice President Kamala Harris. You've never backed down from that. Do you regret that in any way?
No, because it wasn't misogynistic. I don't hate women. I wasn't even hating her as an individual.
It's not misogynistic to suggest that the Vice President got her start into politics by what she did? I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking, is it appropriate?
Is it a verifiable fact that when she was 29 years old, she was dating a 60-year-old who was the Speaker of the House or Speaker of the Assembly in California while he was married, and that's how she got her introduction to politics, and she was appointed to several positions?
All right, first of all, again, I don't want to debate all the little things here.
Okay.
Is it appropriate
She is not
to bring her name up out of the blue when nothing had anything to do with it, and to
She
say
is
comments that even your colleagues on the right in the state legislature called sexist and misogynistic?
She is not a role model, nor should she be. There are many other women that we should be elevating and looking to and presenting to our daughters and sisters and other people as role models.
In this race, there is already another candidate who's trying to primary Senator Langford from the right, Jackson Lawmayer. He says that you are in this race to protect the senator just by splitting votes from the right. And I just want to know what you have to say about that. Is that in any way true?
No, it's laughable to try to make that accusation. I've been proven as the consistent conservative. Like I said, people can campaign as conservatives. They do it all the time, but I'm the one with the actual proven record. I actually had been praying about this and looking at it, considering this, talking to my wife about it for well over a year, considering this race, looking at other races, but this is the main one that we felt we were supposed to jump into because the biggest problem is in Washington, D.C. That's not where the solutions are. As much as they think they're the solution, they're the biggest problem. And what I've experienced at the state level is, yes, we can fight back and push back from the state level through the legislature, through the governor, through our courts, but it's so much better if we just stop things at the federal level before they get forced on the states. And then you have to have the 50 individual states trying to push back on these unconstitutional measures.
Is this because he brings up, even though he calls you a puppet, you're trying to protect Senator Langford, but regardless, the point is there's only so many voters to go around. You have two, yourself included, trying to primary from the right. Is this race, just based on the math, winnable in your opinion?
Absolutely, because yes, there is.
What's it going to take for you to win?
There is a large contingency of people that are upset with the incumbent. I don't know that that's necessarily the majority of the Republican primary voters, but there is a large amount of people that are upset with the incumbent. However, there's a whole other subset of people that know my record, that have seen what I've done on the Second Amendment, that have seen what I've done on the pro-life movement, that have seen what I've done for health freedom, that have seen that I've led the charge. So many Republicans refuse to get in any of these battles because they're concerned about spending their political capital or potentially losing their next election. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about fighting for the people. So the people that want a true fighter, which is what President Trump was and why so many people loved him, is because he said what he said and then he did what he followed up with, and he actually proved to actually complete what he had said he was going to do. So they want a fighter that, yeah, it's easy to give, eloquent speeches and these types of things, but they want somebody that'll actually have the backbone to stand up, and I've proven that I'll do that.
We thank State Senator Nathan Dahm for his time, and we plan to give other candidates in the race for U.S. Senate, including Senator Langford, the same opportunity to sit down with me for an in-depth discussion.